Okay. Hey there. Welcome. I'm happy to have you with me. For those of you who are joining me on Facebook or on Instagram or live on the webinar, say hello. Let me know where you're from. We have some good content for you today. And so again, just give me a wave, say hello, and we want to get going with our presentation today. All right, so today we are talking about, can we diagnose with iridology, or is iridology an assessment tool? We want to answer that question, and we want to justify the answers. So again, let me know where you're from. Give me a little wave, say hello, so that we know who we are working with. We are going to record. There we go. Let's get started. What can we diagnose using iridology? So basically, we're asking the question is iridology an assessment tool or a diagnostic tool? And as we look at that, we're going to answer a lot of questions. Now, you know that I have a mission with Iridology. If you've been with me for more than about 10 minutes, you know I've got a mission. And that mission is that I love mentoring practitioners who are struggling in their businesses because they are spending their own time, unpaid and usually after work hours, creating client programs. And I like to mentor them through Iridology. And I like to teach the truth about iridology and its proper application in a wellness practice. So with that in mind, let's dive into our topic today. We want to ask the question, what can we diagnose using iridology? Right? Now, what we need to do first is define a word. What does diagnosis mean? Diagnosis means to name a disease. So we go to a doctor or a naturopath in some places in the world who is able to run tests, analyze those results, then give us a disease name and create a protocol based on that. That's not a bad thing to do necessarily, but we need to remember that statistics show that there are diagnostic errors in up to 20% of cases based on autopsies that are reported in the British Medical Journal, volume 22, issue supplement 2. So even medical doctors with lots of different tests available are wrong at least 20% of the time. And so we want to be aware of that as we are talking about diagnosing. So the next question we need to ask is, what value does iridology have in creating client wellness programs? So let's look at some iris photos to see what we see, to see whether we are going to diagnose or whether we are going to assess. All right, so I just need to make a quick note here. There we go. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so as we look at this, again, we're going to look at several different cases. And as we do that, well, here, let's pop into the very first one. For those of you on Instagram, I'm going to bring my camera closer so that you can see these images better. There we go. How's that? Is that a good image for you? Instagram, are you seeing that fairly clearly? The color does get a little bit washed out because of lighting. And so, but there's not much I can do with that. So what value is constitutional iridology in an assessment or in working with our clients? So this is a child, a 10-year-old boy, came to me for the first time when he was 10. And I've done a lot of work with ADD and ADHD, and this young boy was brought in by both of his parents, which was very unique. I don't usually get both parents in on the sessions, but this was really cool. And this child was being assessed by the school psychologist for ADD, ADHD. Now, here's what I can tell you that I know about ADD, ADHD. Okay, and this is a reason why it's so important for us to have a solid foundation in anatomy and physiology when we are doing iridology. And we need to have modalities. We need to know either nutrition or herbology or something so that when we see what we see, we can make sound recommendations. So here we go. This young man has a lot of these rings in his eyes. These are called contraction furrows. These do not mean he is under stress. This means that he tends to respond to stress more acutely. He internalizes his stress. All right. He also has lots of these radial furrows. When we put contraction furrows and radial furrows together, it tells us again that he internalizes his stress deeply. Now, what does that mean? For some people, it means that their adrenal glands get a little bit tired, and it means that they don't filter stresses very well. These markings together tell us that this young man burns through his B vitamins, vitamin C, calcium, and magnesium at record speed. When you understand ADD and ADHD, you understand that the adrenal glands are always under functioning. And so legal speed, it's an amphetamine that's designed to bring the functioning of the adrenal glands up. So if we can do that with herbs and vitamins and nutrition, we can get good results. So when we see this, this is not a guarantee of ADD, ADHD. Okay, we need to keep that in mind. What these rings and these radial furrows tell us is that, again, that he burns through nutrients more quickly, specifically the nerve nutrients. And so when we see these, this tells us that we have a higher risk of this person having anxiety or depression or ADD, ADHD, but it's not a guarantee. And so he came in with the possible diagnosis from his doctors and from his school psychologist, and I see this in his eyes, so I then understand what I need to be doing to support him. When people that have these rings, the contraction furrows and the radial furrows are properly nourished, they actually are very productive, right? They like to have to-do lists. They like to get things done. They actually accomplish a lot in their lives when they are well nourished because they like to be busy. Again, it doesn't mean he has to have ADD or ADHD. Those are symptoms, right? And so we want to work with the underlying cause. So we needed to ask questions in doing our assessment with him. I needed to ask, what are his sleep patterns like? How does he handle stress, frustration, and does he get anxious? What is his favorite learning method? 99% of the time when we see someone who's got contraction furrows and radial furrows, they are kinesthetic learners. They need to be in their body to learn. So putting him behind a desk and asking him to sit still, not the right answer. He can't do it. He wants to be fidgety. He wants to be in his body. So if you give him, for example, a basketball and have him practice dribbling the basketball while he's reciting multiplication tables, he'll stay with that, right? If you need to get him to learn, I don't know, some science facts, again, turn it into a kinesthetic thing. Give him things to touch and say with everything he touches. We need to teach this person by putting him into his body, right? Give him physical things. Like, he's not going to be a fabulous accountant, but he'll be a darn good landscaper, right? And, you know, he might even do well studying landscape architecture because there's such a physical component to the practical side of that. So we need to get him being active, but we need to nourish his adrenal glands. There are so many other imbalances in his body that can contribute to ADD and ADHD, but we know that these markers that we've talked about already let us understand why he has a challenge sitting still and focusing in the classroom. Okay, we don't have to diagnose anything. We don't have to say he has ADD, ADHD. We simply need to see these markers and ask questions about his sleep, anxiety, frustration, stress, and his diet, and we'll get a pretty good idea of what we need to be doing to support him. Does that make sense? That we didn't need to label him with anything. We just needed to understand the indicators in his eyes and his behaviors to be able to work with him. If that made sense, give me a makes sense in the comments. This is a female client who was in her mid-20s when she came to me. She had been, was in the process of being diagnosed with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. And this is one of the leading causes of infertility nowadays. And what we know is that PCOS, thank you, Tammy, for letting me know that made sense. What we know about PCOS is that there is often a link to the MTHFR defect. Again, this is why we need to have anatomy and physiology under our belts before we even begin doing iridology. And so when we look at this, we want to ask a bunch of questions. Now, this young woman had gained 60 pounds in less than a year. Her menstrual cycles were getting further and further apart. Her eyes show us that she falls into a connective tissue disorder structure, which in many cases includes polyglandular as a part of it, which tells us that she is more likely to experience hormonal imbalances. Doesn't guarantee them. The guarantee will come when we understand her diet. Now, her diet was junky. It was horrible. And that, with the weight gain, with what we see in her eyes, is enough for us to go, yeah, she's dealing with a hormonal imbalance. I didn't need to call it PCOS. What I usually do is I ask the question, has anyone ever suggested that you might have PCOS? I'm not saying she's got it. That's not my job. I'm not a licensed medical doctor. But she was being assessed for that by her medical doctor. And so what we did, knowing that she tends towards hormone imbalances, and knowing that if she is PCOS, that is best friends with type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance, right? And so we simply put her on a corrective diet and used a few very specific herbs and supplements with her. What we were able to do is she was able to lose 60 pounds in 6 months simply through dietary correction, right? And a few correct supplements. We did nothing specifically that was stimulating for her metabolism. We simply corrected her diet, got her doing some physical activity. And she went on, she's actually pregnant with her 5th child now with no medical interventions. Okay, so I want you to remember that she had a diagnosis of PCOS. And note that what we've seen here does not mean she has PCOS. We had to know her history. We had to know her symptoms in order to know how to interpret what we see in her eyes. So important to have that background information. Now, I say that because this is another example of a client, a female client who has PCOS. Okay, she came to me with the diagnosis of PCOS, type 2 diabetes, and menstrual cycles that were 90 days apart. So when we look at her eyes, we go, well, this eye doesn't look at all like the previous eye, but she's got contraction furrows. Do you remember what we said about contraction furrows with that little boy? The one with ADD, ADHD? What was one of the nutrients he had problems that he was burning through too quickly? I want to see it in the chat box to make sure you're paying attention here. What was one of the nutrients he was processing too quickly? Play with me in my sandbox here, folks. You'll get more out of me the more you play with me. Because I'll just leave that question hanging if I don't get an answer. All righty. All right, so you need to think back. You'll need to watch the recording then to find out what was one of the nutrients, a key nutrient that he was processing too quickly and needed more of. So because, oh, Jenny, very good, Janet. I think it's Janet. And it's actually vitamin B as in baby, vitamin C, calcium, and magnesium. Good job. Thank you for that. I appreciate you playing with me here. Marvelous. Yeah. So again, she's got these contraction furrows, so we know we need to look at her B, C, calcium, magnesium. We know that with PCOS, there is often a link to the MTHFR defect, which means she doesn't methylate her folic acid and her B12 properly. And again, when you know your anatomy and physiology, what you also learn is that with methylation, if people with with MTHFR aren't methylating, and they are women, and actually we're finding it with men as well, they will have reduced fertility. All right, so it all links together. There's also in her eyes, just let me see if I can find it. This image isn't the one I usually use. Right in here, there's a teensy weensy little brown patch. Teensy weensy. It's very, very difficult to see right there. And that tells me as well that she likely is prone to having MTHFR. Now, I don't have the ability to requisition lab tests, so I couldn't say she had that. But because we knew that her menstrual cycles were 90 days apart, she had a diagnosis of PCOS and likely MTHFR, and the fertility clinic had only given her metformin and Clomid, no dietary recommendations, nothing else. What we did is we fixed her diet because her diet was crummy. It was like breakfast was a sweet roll and a glass of juice. Yikes, not great for the blood sugar balance. We got her on a prenatal vitamin that had the methylated Bs. We got her fixing the rest of her diet because there were quite a few things that were not quite right. And we also got her being physically active every day. She would walk the stairs at her office building every day at lunchtime for 30 minutes, which was brilliant. And then on weekends, she and her husband would go for walks. It took her 18 months to get everything balanced, but she did get pregnant. Yay. Had an uneventful pregnancy, had been told she would develop gestational diabetes, but she did not, and delivered a healthy 7-pound baby boy at term in a 3-hour from start to finish labor and delivery. The type of diet that I put my clients on, Janet is asking for more information on that. It depends on the individual, right? Every diet I create is tailor-made for the individual. And so if you're looking for a diet for MTHFR or PCOS, there's lots of those online in various places, but I do tailor-make them. For example, this client was Asian. So I needed to consider her heritage and her dietary patterns there. I couldn't just flip her over to a North American PCOS MTHFR diet, right? So every diet I create is totally unique. Michelle Stornell says insulin resistant. Absolutely, absolutely, Michelle. And that is, or is it, I believe it's you're Italian or you're European, and it's probably not Michelle. It's probably, and I'm saying it wrong, I'm sorry. But yeah, insulin resistance always with PCOS and often with MTHFR. Alrighty, so we're going to look at some more eyes in just a second, but now that I've tickled your fancy, we're going to look at, tell you why I feel like I could tell you this. Janet is also asking, do you believe in plant-based or do you incorporate animal proteins? Again, it depends on the individual. Some people don't handle animal proteins well, and some don't handle plant proteins well. So I literally create the diet based on individual needs and on what they're willing to do. There's no sense in telling them to do something if they're not willing to do it. So I need to work with where their headset is, where their mindset is. So here I am. This is me, for those of you on Instagram. Hi there. And I am an IPA certified iridology instructor. I am one of only 5 level 3 instructors in the world. That's the highest level they have. And I got into holistic healing over 4 decades ago because I had health problems that the doctors would not put their fingers on. I'd been interested in holistic healing, although I didn't know that's what it was, since I was a teenager. So we're talking the mid-1970s when health food stores were still all run by hippies, right? And so, but I was into nutrition. I tried to get my family to eat more vegetables and to use whole grains instead of white flour. Even as a teenager, I was a little bit pushy that way. And then I had the opportunity to learn more as I was in my late teens, very early 20s, and I ran with it. I dropped out of university with enough credits to graduate as a school teacher, but not enough in any one discipline as a school teacher. And I decided I didn't like other people's kids quite well enough to be in a classroom with them all day. I would rather teach adults, quite frankly. Over those 4 decades that I've been in the wellness industry, I've written several books and have self-distributed them, self-published them. The Pregnancy Naturally book, Herbal Birth Kit Handbook, Healthy Kids Naturally, The Essential Guide to Nature's Sunshine Products, Biokinesiology and Color Therapy Level 1 and 2, and most recently, about 5 or 6 years ago, the Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology textbook. I've also created and taught courses, many courses over the years, Herbology Level 1, which was 20 years of practical application of herbs for home use. Herbology Level 2, which focused on how to understand what's in a herbal combination that you would buy in a health food store so that you could use it for more than just what the label said. Biokinesiology and Color Therapy Level 1 and 2, again, I designed a course to go with those textbooks. I was a certified prenatal educator for a few years. That was fun. So I designed and taught prenatal classes. And of course, now I am primarily teaching the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System, which is an approved IPA course, and it contains all of what they consider to be Level 1 and Level 2 to prepare students for certification. So stick with me till the end of today, and I'll give you a bit more information about the course. I'm also a master herbalist and associated with the Alberta Herbalist Association, and a natural nutrition clinical practitioner, and have professional affiliations with the CAN-P and the CAN-Pro organizations. Little tickler here, the next Dynamic Iridology course is going to be starting on August 11th. We're starting a session today, but registration is closed. So the next one is August 11th, and we have early registration is open, and by registering early, you get to spread your payments, make smaller payments over a longer period of time. So if you're interested in learning more, stay with me for the rest of this presentation, and then I'll invite you to book a call to learn more about the course. All right, let's look at some more eyes. This is a female. She was about 20 years old when she came to me for the first time. And Michelle, I love that you've commented on Facebook and you talked about high androgen. Absolutely. With PCOS, there is often high androgen. And so this, again, female, age 20, came to me again, weight gain. And so she was, what 20-year-old female wants to be gaining weight? Right. I can't think of very many that do. And she didn't like the weight that was going on. So I asked her also about her menstrual cycles, and she said they were regular. And I said, regular every 4 weeks? And she said, no, they're 4 weeks late every month. Okay, so your cycles are 8 weeks apart. Yeah. That is the first criterion for determining if she's at risk for PCOS. Any cycles that are over 6 weeks consistently, that's, check 1, probably PCOS. She was gaining weight. Check 2 for PCOS. I asked her about her diet, very high carb, university student, eating at the cafeteria, not the best nutrition in town. I asked her about her lifestyle, no physical activity whatsoever. She was going to university in another country, which meant that she would fly there, and then, she would just walk on campus, and that was the only thing she was doing. There was no other physical activity. And so her medical doctor had not diagnosed her with PCOS, but her symptoms all fit. So I asked her, had she ever, had testing done? And she said no. But she wanted help with the weight. The doctor wasn't being very helpful here, so we did a lot of work with her foods. Now, again, university student, we had to get her to agree that she would stop eating at the cafeteria. She had a kitchen in her apartment, that she would make the 2-mile walk once or twice a week to the grocery store to pick up protein and fresh vegetables, and that she would prepare her meals in her own apartment. We had to talk about the importance of breakfast and getting protein at breakfast. And so we really had to work with simple concepts to get her to understand the importance of nutrition and its impact. So we did that, and within about 2 or 3 months, she lost 10 pounds, which she was happy about, and her cycles were starting to regulate much more cleanly. So the last 3 sets of eyes we've looked at all had PCOS. With this eye, the thing that was the giveaway for me was the way this fiber is lifted off the surface of the iris. This is called a gateway arch. And when it's lifted off the surface like this, it's not going to reattach. This is shows us a genetic predisposition, and it has a high correlation to blood sugar issues, right? And so we knew from there that we were working with blood sugar issues, which means the likelihood of PCOS, and especially when we see the weight gain, and we see that she has cycles that are too far apart, right? So each of these women needed a different approach to get them to the same end result. I wouldn't have known to give them different approaches or even to consider the PCOS 100%edly if I hadn't seen their eyes. And their eyes helped me to understand more of what I needed to do with them on an individual basis to make sure we were getting it right. That's what the eyes do. The eyes teach us what questions to ask, and they guide us. Now, I do a lot of work with fertility in my office, and so that's why most of these examples are women with fertility concerns. This is a female in her mid-30s. She came to me wanting to get pregnant. They'd been trying for a full year to get pregnant with absolutely no luck. And again, she too has a few tiny indicators that she probably has hormonal imbalances and probably is MTHFR. So we look first and we see that she's got contraction furrows. So we're going to be wondering about her vitamin B, C, calcium, magnesium. She's got lots of contraction furrows even coming down here. And she has in this eye, pretty hard to see, this tiny little brown spot right here, which has a really high correlation, again, to MTHFR. So we worked for about 6 months and worked with her nutrition, which was really quite excellent when we started. So we were boosting certain things like getting more protein and getting more fats into her. We got her on an excellent quality prenatal vitamin, and we augmented that with some other supplements as well. And partway through the pregnancy, she decided to do the 23andMe genetic test, and it came back affirmative for MTHFR. Right, she was a very anxious woman, which makes perfect sense with MTHFR because the way they process their bees, they can end up very anxious. And the email she sent me was just vibrating with anxiety. She was so concerned about her baby and this MTHFR thing. And I was able to tell her that I had suspected this from the get-go and that I had been working with her as if she had MTHFR, so we were fine. Nothing to worry about. And she so appreciated that. Now, I will tell you, I would not have known had it not been for her eyes that she had PCOS, or I'm sorry, that she had MTHFR. I would not have even suspected it, right? And so very cool that we were able to create that for her. Again, if I hadn't seen her eyes, I wouldn't have known. Here's your anatomy lesson for today, the sphincter of Oddi. Do you know what the sphincter of Oddi is? If you know what and where the sphincter of Oddi is and what it does, give me a yes in the comments. I did not know what this was until I had a client come in and say, I've got a sphincter of Oddi problem. Do you know what sphincter of Oddi is and what it does and why it acts up? Yes, no, maybe. So when we look at the liver and we have the hepatic bile ducts that feed down into the gallbladder and also continue on down through the pancreas and towards the duodenum or the duodenum, depending on where you live. And what happens is when people have the gallbladder removed, it's very common for this sphincter of Oddi to either become spasmed and literally spasm shut, or to become blocked in some way. And so this was a client who'd been with me for many years, and as many of my clients do, he was away for a few years. And in that time, he had a gallbladder issue and had had his gallbladder removed. And his side effect was this sphincter of Oddi. And so again, over time, it either spasms or it just constricts and it gets smaller and smaller. Now here's the challenge. The gallbladder issue was not genetic. The sphincter of Oddi issue was not genetic. In looking at his eyes from before the surgery, we would be looking right in this area for gallbladder. There is not a single hint that he should have gallbladder. So this is where we need to understand emotions, right? When you understand the emotions of the gallbladder, you understand that that's where you store anger, bitterness, and resentment, and that unresolved anger is what will often lead to gallstones. If you ever met this man, you would understand why he had that problem. He is the most gentle man. I mean, he's tall, he's robust, he hunts, he fishes, he builds things. I mean, he's definitely a man's man kind of thing, like, right? He's very masculine, but he's also very gracious. And the line of work he was in, he spent a lot of time biting his tongue and being angry and not saying a word. So when we talked about gallbladder and I said, hey, Kevin, you know, I know you to be a very gentle person. I know you to be very courteous, very considerate, but I also know what you've told me about your work, that you get frustrated, you get angry, that the people that you work with, they want you to falsify records and you won't. You have integrity. They want you to look the other way and say certain things didn't happen, and you can't because your integrity is on the line. And so it leads to anger that you don't express. Am I correct? And he went, yeah. And I said, we need to find a way for you to let go of that anger because it's already taken your gallbladder. What's it going to take next? Right? So because we couldn't see leading up to this in the years leading up, there's no significant indicator of gallbladder in here. And you know what that means is that there was no way to know because that emotion that built up over time was not a genetic thing. It was a situational thing. So there was no way I could have predicted that he would end up with a gallbladder situation. Although, you know, the other pigments in his eye do suggest a little bit of a risk of tendency towards gallbladder. And so in a general sense, we could have possibly picked up on the anger that was under the surface. But at any rate, we didn't. And he ended up having his gallbladder out. So can we use iridology to diagnose? No, we cannot. Oh, Michelle, I love this. He's saying the parasympathetic innervation is the main extrinsic innervation of the sphincter. There you go. Thank you for that. I learned something. And that's not unique for me to learn something, by the way. I learn from lots of my students and my people who hang out with me. So thank you for that. I truly appreciate that. All right. So there we go. So it doesn't matter if you were a herbalist, a nutrition coach, an aromatherapist, or a naturopath, we still don't diagnose using iridology. We use iridology to guide our questions, to help us understand the client, to help us understand where their genetic strengths and weaknesses are, what their personality tendencies are. And that is what guides us in our recommendations without us ever needing to label the client in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so this is so, so important because it is the iridologists who insist on diagnosing that are giving the rest of us a bad name. They're using old iridology that has been disproven, and we need to be walking away from that and going to where the new research is happening and understanding what we can do with this. Iridology is an assessment tool. It points the way to the questions we should ask. and it guides us in the dietary and herbal recommendations that we want to make, because it helps us to understand what our clients' genetic potentials are. And for those of you on Instagram, I'm just going to put my phone back on the stand. Iridology is not diagnostic. So again, if you've been hanging out with me for any length of time, you know that those two missions I have, number one is to teach and mentor wellness practitioners in the art and science of iridology to help them be more effective in their businesses. And number two, it's to teach the truth about iridology and its proper application in wellness. I've been teaching wellness practitioners like you the art and science of iridology for decades. And registration, again, for the next go-round of the dynamic iridology assessment system is starting right now. Registration is starting right now, and that course will be starting on August 11th. If you are a wellness professional, or if you are enrolled in courses to become a wellness professional, and if you have anatomy and physiology already under your belt, and you want to learn iridology at a professional level, you want to learn not just what the markers are, but how to use the markers, how to interpret the markers. You saw several examples of PCOS, and those eyes each looks different from one another, right? You can learn how to assess different eyes and end up where you need to end up, but only if you've got anatomy and physiology under your belt. So if this appeals to you, if it's something you're interested in, and if you're ready to make an investment in learning, a professional level course has professional tuition because of the amount of support you will receive throughout this course, then I invite you to give me a call. If having mentoring and support is important to you in your educational process, then my course is probably a good fit for you. The Dynamic Iridology Assessment System is the only live, online, fully mentored course for herbalists, nutritionists, naturopaths who want to streamline their clinical work without sacrificing client care. I find a lot of holistic practitioners spend time with their client, gather information, and then go off on their own time to create protocols. And the time that they're spending creating protocols is time they're not getting paid for. They're really getting paid for maybe 1 hour out of every 4 or 5 hours they work. When we spend that much time creating a protocol, it's too much information, it's overwhelming to the client, and it's very difficult for the clients to stick with and to find success with. So I teach in my course how to create protocols based on iridology and based on asking your clients the right kinds of questions from their eyes, and to create those protocols in your paid client sessions. No more unpaid overtime, no more overwhelming your clients. The goal of the course is to teach you constitutional iridology at a level that you can be very confident with, and to teach you how to integrate it with what you already know about nutrition and herbology, if you've got those skills as well, so that you can confidently create doable client programs in your paid client sessions. So, so important. And so with that, again, I'm just going to pop back here. If you meet the criterion, you're a wellness professional, or you're in school enrolled in a program to become one, and you've got your anatomy and physiology under your belt, and you want to learn iridology and be mentored in it for the long term, then go ahead and use this tinyurl.com/insight-call. Let's have a conversation, and let's see if the August start date and the course are a good fit for you. Alrighty, from there, my friends, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask that we didn't answer? We'll give you just a moment to do that. See if there's anything. I know there's about a 15-second delay. All right. And Janet is saying, thanks for the good information. You are most welcome. I hope to have you in a course soon. And with that, my friends, I think we'll wrap it up for today. Have a fabulous day, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.